dark cloud hovering over AI is not really on the technology, it's more on the human, that most roles will evolve, not really, like end, but it's all going to be dependent on the person. There will be always people who try to doubt you, but it is very important to learn that it is their doubt about you and not necessarily your doubt about yourself.
Hi everyone. In today's episode, we are talking all things artificial intelligence, its impact, misconceptions, and the practical ways how it's changing our life. And to help us do that, we have an amazing guest. Deandra's journey is nothing short of fascinating. She started with PhD in physics and made an incredible transition into the world of business intelligence and data science. Hello, Deandra. I am so happy to have you here. I truly believe today's podcast will be one of the most exciting ones because we will be talking all things AI. And this is definitely a hot topic for a while now. Our lives have really changed. We have to admit that. And I think your personal journey is equally fascinating. You went from earning a PhD in physics, right, to leading BI and data science. I feel like that's such a unique transition. Can you walk us through your journey and how you end up where you are today?
It is quite uncommon. So I never knew that I could be a data scientist. And I remember my last year of the doctorate and I was doing astrophysics. I met with a Maltese fellow who did a PhD, who was working in London in a job that I wanted. And I was like, how did you go from doing a PhD similar to mine, being a data scientist in London? I want that. How do I get that? And he was the one who made me aware that all the techniques, all the skills that I was acquiring for my doctorate research actually are being named or referred to as data analyst, data scientist, machine learning engineer in the industry. And that is something that no one has told me before. And I remember asking him, but I'm studying Einstein's theory. How does that relate to a hedge fund? And he told me it's not about the domain, it's about the skills. So, like you need to kind of like zoom out. So what I did then, I started looking up astrophysicists who are working as data scientists in Silicon Valley, and I was quite impressed that it's something that other people in other parts of the world were aware about. And I brushed up my CV, and like 3 weeks later, I got a job offer as data scientist, and I started my first role as a data scientist in 6 months. So all I needed was someone to tell me this links to that.
Wow. I really love at the beginning how you said that you met someone and you said, that's what I want. How do
Yes.
I actually get there? In such a male dominated industries, imposter syndrome is common. Did you ever feel that? Did you feel like you maybe sometimes do not belong or you are the only woman in your field?
Yes, I've actually discovered that about myself like 4 years ago. I knew that there was something that blocks me, but I didn't know that there was a name for it. And once I understood it, that's where I started getting educated. I admit that it does paralyze me. So sometimes you are in a meeting where you feel so overwhelmed by being the odd one out that it paralyzes me to the point that I just want to go home in my room in the dark. No one talks to me, and trying to figure out a way to get out of that position, quit, like give up and just, just let it go. But through self-education and following other people, I've learned a rule for myself that I will only let imposter syndrome take me down for one day. For one day, I give in. For one day, all the things that the voice, the imposter, wants to tell me, you're not good enough, you don't belong. Look at how more educated they are, how more qualified they are. It has one day, just one
Just
day.
one day.
The next day, it's me.
Wow.
Exactly. It is something that I live with. It is something that I continuously fight. It's not always easy to be a lead, to actually always be at the top of the game. And I don't think it gets easier. I just think that you learn to live with it and you learn how to balance.
Yeah, I agree. It really makes you question at some point. Am I
Exactly.
actually good at what I do? But I love your concept of just one day.
Just
That's
one day.
the only time that you can actually feel down, but the next day you just have to get up and start from beginning. That's really
Exactly.
great. Can you share with us what sparked your passion for AI and its ethical challenges from the beginning?
AI is around statistics and, like data analytics. That interest started with my doctorate and my bachelor's, but I remember my first data science role. I was tasked with identifying customers who have opened multiple accounts. And while I was doing the research, I found out that I have a lot of data about these customers. And that made me raise my eyebrows like, okay, I can see all this data about the customers of the company I work for. Does that mean that the companies I'm a client of or a customer of have the same data? So I started checking, whether it's something that it's industry specific. And then in 2018, the GDPR law was enforced. I started learning about that. And that's where my curiosity about ethics and data and how it should be used and discrimination and bias really started to grow. The thing is with AI, it could be that the method is biased, but the likelihood is that the data is biased. So it's not always, well, most of the time, it's not the technology that is wrong. It's the data that is wrong. And when you realize that, you kind of say, well, I could actually avoid all these things if I just curate my data better. And it all stemmed from the fact that I wasn't comfortable with companies having all this data about me, location. I'm one of those people who check the cookie settings. I don't share all the photos of my camera with different social media. I actually manage access one by one, which is a bit frustrating sometimes, but makes me feel like I have some control over my data, which may not necessarily be true, but I'd like to think so.
You're so right, because this is so enforced on us. Every
Yeah,
single app that you download, every website you register, just by default, you are giving access to everything. And you, as you said, you actually have to go manually and manage one by one, which majority of people, of course, wouldn't do because maybe they're just not aware. This is something
exactly.
that as well, what I really like, it came to you through your personal experience, through seeing how much data is being collected. And I guess the scariest part, what is actually being done with that data,
Exactly.
or what could be done with that data. So, Deandra, many people hear data science lead and think of complex models, coding all day. Tell us honestly, what does a typical day actually look like for you?
So, as a data scientist, you would be coding most of the time and research, but as data science lead, it is a bit different. So, your role is more of a consultant, of a mentor, and influencing other people, knowledge sharing. So, I spend most of my time either in meetings or preparing for those meetings or preparing for presentations or how to mentor my team, but also to listen to the business, understand the business problems, and then think, okay, how can I solve that for the business?
Could you give us an example of some kind of meeting, something not revealing too much details of your personal job, but so that we get a better understanding what kind of meetings a data science lead would participate in?
If I were to take a generic example, the use of AI for a company, and this could be any company. If you tell someone you shouldn't use AI because of risks, it may go over their heads. They might say, oh, maybe she's worried about losing her job, or maybe she doesn't like the technology. But actually, if you go a bit deeper, there would be an understanding as to why. And one of my responsibility is to explain in a technical manner or in a non-technical manner, depending on the audience, why there needs to be a bit of a assessment. So it's not don't use the AI, but do you have a legitimate use case to use it, or are you gonna use it just because you want to? More than one meeting to get the message across, and it could be that maybe I'm talking too difficult, so I need to reassess how I communicate with that particular audience.
Of course. That sounds super interesting. What would you say are some key skills? Because More you're explaining what your job looks like, more I'm realizing that even I have a very different understanding of what data scientist does. What would you say are some key skills that are needed to be successful in your role?
So the key word in data science is science. So understanding that it stems from the scientific method. So essentially you're building up experiments, you're trying to understand why the data looks like that and building theories to explain that data, which is where prediction comes in. So if we think about, for example, Newton, he wanted to explain something and he conducted a set of experiments. He built up a theory. He started tweaking the theory until he was able to predict each and every what we call observable of the future. Now that is purely science, and data science is to do those experiments with data. So I believe that to be successful in the role is to first understand that what you're doing is experimenting. There's no guarantee that you're gonna get good results or any results, if anything, but that you can always change the theory. So if the hypothesis didn't work, you change it, you tweak it until it works, or maybe you change the methodology. So there's a lot that you can vary. I think the most important thing is that you need to be willing to remain a student for life. That if you set in to say, okay, I'm going to do 5 years, I'm going to become a lead, and then, I'm done learning, and then I'll become chief or anything. I think that's the wrong misconception. With data science and now with AI, everything is evolving. Different theories that you thought, like that I thought applied to a certain field and not another. Now they're merging together. So it's more of a attitude to be successful in data science. Are you okay remaining a student, even if you're the most experienced and expert in the fields in your network, and you're required to be humble enough to say, I don't know that yet, but I'm going to learn it.
Yeah, mostly in such a fast evolving world. I think anyone who will be listening to this podcast can feel your passion on what you do and your passion for data science and a better future, I would even say. How do you take a complex model and make it understandable for everyday users?
It is becoming key to have models explainable. The way that I approach explainability is to break down a complex model into different phases. So understanding the data first. We conduct what is called exploratory data analysis. So usually once you explore the data, you already know more or less which models will work, what output are you expecting, and by formulating that, you can start building correlations, causality, like, okay, because this depends on that, and you already start building the explainability. The second part is to feed it into a model and then see whether what you expected actually matches with the outcome. This may not always be the case, which means that there needs to be some assessment. Okay, is my EDA not right, or have I misunderstood the model? By breaking it down, it helps. It also helps by using non-complex models. And you can start building those explainability features using non-complex but simple, what I call classic machine learning models to give a baseline on the explainability. Will it ever be accurate? Will it ever be the right one? That is a big question. But I think that there's a lot of research trying to expose this. I think that if we put our mindset that we want an explainable AI, that we will find a way, and that would be computationally effective and optimal, but it's still not there yet. We can use simple models to at least explain some of the predictions, like some of the top 5% predictions, for example, that would most likely impact someone.
And I guess the importance of AI explainability, how would you describe that? Why is it so important?
It is important because over-reliance on AI is becoming a thing. Humans who use AI, some humans, not all of them, they just take AI output for granted and then they propagate it down the system. That means that humans could be discriminated, there could be a bias. Maybe there's a wrong decision and the budget has been allocated to that decision and then it goes sideways. So then the business would say, well, you told me that this would generate 5% revenue, for example. And then as a data scientist, I can never tell the business that's what the AI told me. It's not acceptable. You always have to have the explanation. You always have to say, well, we have indicators that this does this, that this does that, supporting with data, the data-driven explainability, actually. And it's even if we look at regulations that are trying to come out and are being enforced, accountability is one of the things that is being echoed. How do you promote accountability if you're just going to take the AI output as your own without that fact checking, without that explainability element? Then there would be a lot of unfortunate events, either with companies or even in private lives.
Wow, it makes a lot of sense. Can we take just a step back and think about someone that has no technical background? How would you explain the real world impact of AI in a way that maybe they could relate to?
So the dark cloud hovering over AI is not really on the technology, it's more on the human. And that's what I do. So I take a use case, for example, what if someone took a photo, changed it, and spread it in a way that makes you feel uncomfortable because you know it's not you, or maybe it embarrasses you, and then amplify it. What if the photo is so good, it's realistic, it looks real, and it's very hard to detect, and amplify it a bit further? What if that there is a video, which means that it's very hard for people to believe that it's actually not you? What if someone uses that to do something wrong and the police come to you, for example? For example, with my parents, when I, like, don't click on links if you don't know who sent them to you. Don't believe everything you see on social media. Do you remember when this happened? And you said, yeah, but it looked a bit fake, so they should have known. Nowadays, it's getting very, very difficult. And on LinkedIn, there are some challenges where people are asked to see whether you could detect AI or not. Personally, I scored 6 out of 10, which means that I've missed AI 4 times. I don't know whether I'm uncomfortable because I missed those fours, or whether I'm uncomfortable because I couldn't even tell the difference. Unfortunately, these things happen. Again, it's not the technology, it's the intent. And I think as humans, whether they're tech background or not, that malintent is widely understood.
It's true, the content is becoming so hard to understand if something is actually real or not. At some point, you are really just looking at something and thinking, is this even real?
You
And
can't even tell.
you can't. And that's the scary part. And I think with AI getting better and better at many different things, as you said, it's not the technology. The technology itself is amazing, right? It's the
Yes.
people behind and the data being used that is more scary. And if you don't mind, I know that you also have started taking some legal courses to help understand in the first place where you can actually make a bigger impact. So not just from the data science perspective, but also from the legal part. Can you tell us a little bit about that as well?
Yes, it is something that I took upon myself. So, as a scientist, reading a legal document is not a walk in the park. Absolutely not. However, it's the element of forging relationships. How can I understand the legal requirements? How can I make sure that a project that I propose has legal, legal roots? I remember when GDPR came out, we were told you need to anonymize all the data. It's a massive work. We have to, invest a lot of money. From a data perspective, all I need is to know a person with internal ID 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 has done this, and then only the person that actually needs to know the identity of that person, we can link them together. But until I started learning these things, I couldn't relate regulations with data solutions. And it is for that reason that I started taking these courses on my personal time to understand, okay, the regulations are going to come in. How can I make sure that I understand them and then translate them into something that data can support? And I didn't want that element to be a gap in my skills. I wanted to be fully equipped with skills that say, okay, if I can't use this, then I can do it without, so that I'm never blocked to innovate. But being aware helps you be better prepared. And without reading regulations, just going blindly thinking that you can do anything, and then after doing the whole project, investing time and capacity, then someone would say, actually, no. When you scope the project, see what you need to be aware of, and then lead and innovate.
Such a great initiative. I can imagine it's definitely not easy for data scientists to start digging into the
No,
legal
and
parts.
for the most part, I think When it comes to legal and ethical issues, I think that sometimes there's this misconception that it's a legal problem. And if it's related to the data, it's a data problem. But the more I learn and the more I do courses, the more I understand that it's actually both, that each person needs to be aware of these regulations. So each person needs to contribute rather than, like say, that's not my problem. It's actually everybody's responsibility. And for a data scientist who's comfortable behind the screen coding with numbers, all of a sudden you have a lot of documentation to read. It's a bit out of the comfort zone, but it starts to make a lot of sense in your work.
It's amazing. Many people think of AI in terms of chatbox automation. What are some more unlikely ways, lesser known ways maybe, that AI is shaping industries today?
AI is a term that, yes, you're right. It's a concept that is more related to generative AI, the concept of tools that simulate conversations. But AI really and truly encompasses all classic machine learning models, deep learning models, computer vision, for example, the detection from cameras where they detect a person, or for example, something that in my country have been implemented where a certain type of waste have been left behind and not the kind that is acceptable for that particular day. There's also signal processing where you process audio to try and find different tones of the conversation, whether you can detect a bit of nervousness, for example. And even in space, for example, AI can be used to correlate different data sources and say, actually, there's something here which maybe a human have overlooked. So when it comes to AI, even though the hype is around, like chatbots, like ChatGPT, Claude, and so on, there's a whole other area of artificial intelligence, and some of it is not even artificial per se. It is intelligence built by humans, and you just, build an app on it. And for someone who wants to use it, again, it may look like AI, but actually it's really logic and statistics.
Yeah, the scale actually is fascinating. I think
Yes.
just as a generic user, you kind of take those generic parts of AI, but the actual scale of AI being used as technology across the industries is really, really fascinating. Now, if we go back to the generic user, though,
Mm-hmm.
can you share one or two practical ways that people can safely use AI, maybe even outside of tech, for their, I don't know, productivity, learning new skills?
So AI is a great enabler, and I think one of the best ways that whether you're a tech person or a non-tech person is guidance, to use it as a guidance. How do I start learning about, I don't know, UI, UX, for example, or how can I be a web designer? And the output of the AI would be guidance on where to start. You can say, well, like I prefer part-time courses. And then another way that you could use it is to learn that skill. So let's say you want to learn a new tool. You can see whether the AI can support you into guiding you to learn how to use that tool. I do believe that at one point it requires an expert in that particular tool to really master that tool, but there's nothing stopping anyone from starting from scratch. Like it's the element of being a student again. Another thing that I find AI to be useful is to shrink some workload. So let's say your task is to send an email, an email, and you can't use a template, for example, but you know that more or less it has to look like this. AI can help you generate multiple variations of the same email with specific tones. There should always be a human to review that it's actually doing what it's supposed to do, but something that could have taken someone 2 days, it could have taken them one day, which means more capacity to do something new. Well, unfortunately, AI hasn't been designed yet to do house chores, but I do welcome the innovation when it comes.
Of course, couldn't agree more. I use it every day pretty much for some kind of small jobs on my day to day work. I just recently tried it after the conference. So, what happens often with me, I just really want to be with the person if I'm having a meeting and really pay attention to them. I do not want to end up typing, all the notes. Because I work in product, often my goal is to kind of collect the feedback. But again, even if I have those forms in place, it's just really unnatural for me to read from them while I'm having that conversation. So what I usually do, I just leave myself voice notes just after the conversation so I can still remember everything we discussed. And then later on, I can listen to it and I can kind of put everything together and make sense. And recently after the conference, I ended up with like 25 or 30 voice messages. And I was like,
Wow.
I now have to listen to my own voice just to type these notes. So I ended up putting AI, ChatGPT on my laptop, my notes on my phone. I made ChatGPT listen to my notes. And then I gave forms that I care about, basically the feedback that is important, so that it can make sense out of everything that people shared with me, the feedback that they shared about the product. The AI now can generate some insights for me. And it was such a huge help. Instead of me spending 3 to 4 hours, noting everything myself, now I can actually pay more attention of where we can improve. What can we do with this feedback? So yes, I feel like it can definitely help in day-to-day work. And I think it's going to get even more innovative as it goes.
Yes.
Really,
And it's gonna disrupt roles. I may be biased and maybe a bit naive or positively hopeful, but I do believe that most roles will evolve, not really, like end, but it's all gonna be dependent on the person. So if again the element of being a student, if the idea that, like you do the work as you do it today, tomorrow, then yes, the disruption is going to be more impactful than if you say, okay, well, yeah, my workload has changed, my role has evolved, I'm ready to learn, I'm ready to adapt. I think that's where you see the benefits of AI.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I also think that certain roles will have to evolve, and the things
Yes.
that you have done day to day, yes, AI will be able to take that over, and you will have to learn how to work with it instead of against it. I don't think anyone can stop it, right?
And I don't think they should.
Yeah,
It's a good
it's progress.
technology.
Yeah, I agree. So, do you think that in the future, if we think about the landscape of jobs, do you
Mhm.
think there will be more and more professionals that are AI professionals? Someone that would be employed in a company as an expert of AI?
Actually, I had a conversation with someone the other day. I think it's going to be dependent on the company itself. So, if the company is a company that builds AI, I think the roles like engineering, data scientists, analysts, I think all these will still be required because they need to curate the data, they need to clean it. But if you're a company that you want to leverage AI, so let's say you want to build a slim team of engineers, for example, then first and foremost, you need someone who is experts on AI models just to make sure that you're always taking advantage of the latest research, latest tool. But then the roles itself within that team would have different requirements than the traditional roles that we're seeing today. And I think it is very important to make that distinction because one is an AI user, a company that uses AI, whereas the other one is trying to continuously break frontiers in AI to innovate the next state-of-the-art model. What I do believe and or hope, but I genuinely believe that, is that in the short term, the disruption may seem negative, that we may see like all the hype, AI is going to take the jobs. But at the same time, at the back end of this, there's going to be job opportunities. So let's take, for example, a language translator. Maybe in a company that wants to leverage AI, maybe they don't need AI translators anymore. But then the company that is building the AI translator requires those experts to educate a machine. I understand how that sounds, but to tell the machine like, okay,
Yes.
this word with this word is actually this word in that language and not another word. Like if you take two words separately versus if you take the context together. If you look at LinkedIn, for example, there's a lot of roles that are emerging. Content writer to train RAI, SEO marketer to train RAI. So whether it's gonna balance it off, I don't know. But I think that it's gonna disrupt that in the sense there's gonna be shift. And it doesn't necessarily have to mean it's a bad thing. It just means that we have to adapt and seek our own opportunities. If there's no opportunity, then we go create one. Maybe I'm being hopeful here or positive, but like the ecosystem, it shifts, but I think there's always a circle at the end of the day.
Yeah, I'm actually with you here as well. I do think it's exciting what is happening. It definitely will disrupt the current job roles. But as you said, as long as you are willing to learn, as long as you have that willingness to stay as a student, there is always a possibility and opportunity as well. So it's
Yeah.
just a perspective. We sometimes look exactly at the same thing from two different angles. It can be negative or positive. So I always would choose to stay with positive where possible.
Yes, that's how I choose to live life.
Love that. So tell me, growing up, did you have any female role models in tech, or did you carve your own path, or maybe outside of tech?
I always have the most unconventional story. My role model is Gabrielle Chanel. She is not in tech. I don't think that in the late 1800s
Probably not.
there was anything like. But I remember the first time that I stumbled upon her biography. I was mesmerized. I was stunned. Like a woman whose status is determined by the men she married. She went on. She's decided that she wants to do straw hats. And then she just then decided that she wants to open a shop. Sure, she couldn't take a loan on her name, but then when she found out, she said, "Well, actually, I want to pay you off because I want my business to be mine." And all this in an era where women did not have half the rights that we have. And that's what captivated me. I continued reading about her, and each time it was like, she did it. What's my excuse? And yes, I may have carved my own path in tech, but it was always the echo, like if Gabrielle Chanel could build an empire. I'm not talking about her personal life and how she chose to live her personal life and relationships. It's more about how she was determined that she wants to be a fashion designer. Now she's a fashion icon, it's something that her legacy lives on. And she didn't have the same rights, the same opportunities, the same tools that I have today. So every time I start thinking that maybe as a woman I shouldn't because, you get a lot of obstacles, I remember her and think, she did it. What's
Yeah.
my excuse? It could be that I have to work a little harder, but is it hard? Is it really hard? Like other women have actually had it harder? Is that my excuse? I reread her biography and every now and again because for me it has an impact of, like drawing strength from her story.
That's so inspiring. Really, so inspiring. And also so interesting to see someone so achieved in tech space having a role model, someone who is completely outside of tech. But
Yeah.
I couldn't agree more. I think she's fascinating. And her story, as you said, what is my excuse? If she'd done it without the tools and without the opportunities in a much, much more harsh environment to women at that time.
Yeah. And during both world wars as well.
Yes. So, if you could give one piece of advice to women chasing ambitious goals in tech, what would it be?
It is something that I've learned very recently. I wish I learned it a long time ago. It is all in the mindset. It has nothing to do with lack of opportunities because if there is none, you go create one. And it is all in the mindset. So if you believe that you have what it takes, then go for it. There will be always people who try to doubt you, but it is very important to learn that it is their doubt about you and not necessarily your doubt about yourself. It is something that I genuinely wish I learned a long time ago. But if you have that mindset, and even if people tell you that's not possible, that's not possible, that's not possible, if you think that there's even a remote possibility, just work in silence, build up your momentum, go for it. And I think that's something I wish I have learned and something that I try to echo when I talk to other women. And even, like it doesn't have to be women, other people aspiring to break into tech, like because everyone has challenges. It's all in your mindset. I mean, if Stephen Hawking taught us anything, if your mind is strong, you can do anything. And
You can do anything, right?
that's all it takes.
Such a good advice. I literally got shivers just listening to it because it's so true. And we so often take other people's doubts into something our own.
Yes.
We have to really filter whatever comes through because there is always noise happening around you. there is always people to tell you that you cannot or you should not. Just filtering and making sure that you're hearing that, okay, but it doesn't mean that you have to let it all in, and it doesn't have to affect your future.
Sometimes, someone would tell you, yes, but you don't have, like, for example, let me take my example. I'm a data scientist. I'm not a lawyer. And, sometimes you talk to someone and they say, but you don't have the legal, like, understanding. So sometimes that doubt can be a strength. Great, I'm going to go learn it then, like, and those
Yes,
naysayers become stepping stones. So that
just changing that
milestone becomes
mindset.
more exactly. So it's you hear everything, but as you said, you filter, and sometimes through the discouragement comes an opportunity. And again, it's all in the mindset on how you filter that. Whether you see it as a negative or an opportunity, it's up to you. But I wish I learned it before. There's always an opportunity with every criticism. And if you take every criticism as constructive, even if someone says you don't have the skills, great. Okay, I'm going to go and get them then. That's also positive. Even if you don't have them now, in 3 months, 6 months, a year, you're going to get them, and then you're going to be a good candidate for that role. And is that positivity towards what you do, that you love what you do, that you're not scared to remain a student all your life? And yeah, it's such a powerful thing to learn. And I wish that in education, in life, in general, in society, it is something that is empowered rather than societal expectations.
Yes, I couldn't agree more. And with such a powerful note, we will end today's episode. Thank you, Deandra, for joining me. It was a complete pleasure talking to you and learning about data science and AI. I'm sure that anyone who will listen will take something for themselves out of this conversation.
I appreciate that. Thank you.